There we are. That, and now we'll share the screen. And go to that and zoom way out from there. That is where we left off on last Sunday. So you can zoom a bit out from there, minimize that, move that on out of the way some. So here we are. So good morning, happy Sunday, happy September. Good to be with you all. Continuing our look through the world according to the Bible. And we are moving on centuries past the Tower of Babel, getting ready for the time of Abraham. The Genesis 11 and 12 range is where we're looking at. So when we last left off, who are the players in charge and what's happening around here? Over in the city of Kish, as this first dynasty is winding down, we got the two lines of rulers. And one line we have Arwiam as king, whose name means Melgazel. And the other line we have Enmi Baragesi, who's about to be replaced by his son. Over here in Uruk, we have Gilgamesh, great grandson of Nimrod, who is a king. And over here in Egypt, as we saw wrapping up last week, in this fourth dynasty, we have the Pharaoh Cheops or Khufu, who built that great pyramid in Giza that we took a look at last week that has that ship and museum there as well. So picking things up here, we are dealing with, let me open up our presentation here. There we go. Fire that one off and present. And so the last scriptures we read were in Genesis 11 with the death of ARPACHSHAD. And so that means that his remaining descendants are getting up there in age as time is passing. So Shelah is now 400 years old. EBER is 270, PELEG's 136, and little baby Ru is all of 6 years old when that happens. So we are following along in our timeline here. We are a couple more. Okay, so we have seen, while that is opening up here, do a quick refresh. Notice it was doing this last night. So we're looking at the generation of Ru, Abraham's great-great-grandpa, and what was happening in the world that he grew up in. We're seeing again, as I've made the point before, everything that happened, we know someone from the Bible who was alive when it happened. Nothing is outside of God or his people. And his desire is for all of them. We talk about wanting to reach our community. Well, God still wanted to reach those who departed from him, as we're looking at to the line of Ham. Those in Egypt, it's Pharaohs, with their whole death cult and all that we talked about last week. God hasn't given up on them. He's still trying to reach them and witness to them, encourage them. So we're in the generation of Ru, also the generation of Gilgamesh. As mentioned, ARPACHSHAD has died. Gilgamesh has grown up to become the king of Uruk. We're in that fourth dynasty in Egypt, started with Snefru. His son Khufu is now Pharaoh and built that great pyramid. We're getting ready for 2400, where the Bible dates are going to line up with this guy's archaeology and timeline that I believe is right after this. That'll lead into the fifth dynasty. Shelah will die. Ru will become the father of SERUG, Abraham's great-grandpa. And we'll see his line. And time is going to start going a lot faster now as the men are living shorter, as we see carry out in the Bible. So the first thing that's going to happen now that Pharaoh Khufu has built his pyramid and has his boat ready for him for when he takes that journey, we are going to now go to right there we are.
Just a refresher, brother.
Yeah, please.
When SERUG was born to him?
We actually aren't there just yet, but I can look ahead and tell you. When SERUG is born, Ru is right here, Genesis 11. And it's different in the Septuagint. Remember, there's the extra 100 years. So when Ru becomes the father of SERUG, No, they're actually both correct on this one. He's 207 years old. I'm sorry, no, I take that back. He lives 207 years after being the father. He's 132 when he becomes the father. Yeah. So young folk, there's time. So what we're doing is we're taking a visual stroll through the world of these people are living in. So we're just going on a field trip. I'm your tour guide, just showing you the world, giving you kind of visuals to where when we hear about these old patriarchs, we hear about these old times, this is what was happening around. These are the things that they were seeing in the land of Mesopotamia, where this guy is, and over in the land of Egypt, where we know the Lord's people somehow keep finding themselves. So I mentioned over in Kish, in that second line, Enmi Baragesi was the ruler. Well, not anymore. Now his son Aga has taken over. So after spending all that time with Egypt stuff, this is some of the imagery and the writing, the cuneiform from these people, where the line of Shem is, where Ru is growing up in this Mesopotamia, Persian Gulf area. They're not in Egypt yet. They're aware of Egypt. They're seeing Egypt rise in power, become pretty dominant, but they're dealing more on the home front here. So this is more of their culture and their world, and we'll see a little bit more of that. So this guy Aga is actually mentioned in the stories of Gilgamesh. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, he's his military rival. Gilgamesh is in Uruk, Aga is over here in Kish. So they've got a rivalry going on between them. And it's mentioned that Aga was the son of Enmi Baragesi. We have historical records of him. So that's part of what's going on in Mesopotamia. And just again, taking our stroll through the images and the people of this time. Now after Khufu, we've got a new pharaoh named, you can see that down there, it's kind of dark, Djedeferi. I call him Jeffrey. So we've got Pharaoh Jeffrey now. The Jeffrey, however his name is pronounced. He's the son of Khufu. He marries his brother's widow, who was actually his sister as well. And it's possible that after he died, she married the next brother who became the next pharaoh. So all in the family there. Yeah, you know. So launching our field trip. So with this guy, Jeffrey, his pyramid does not quite look like the others. Remember the grandeur of the Great Pyramid there of Cheops. Please. So my wife asked, how many total pyramids are there? I have no idea, and knowing it's because we are still actually discovering them. You think, how could you lose something that big?
Do you know what the current count is?
No, I do not know offhand what the current count is. I can certainly find that, but I do not know off the top of my head.
I mean, is it dozens?
I would say so.
Hundreds?
I don't think hundreds, probably dozens.
Because they're finding the underground of the, yeah.
Mhm.
They would still-
Right. Because like this one, again, we're seeing where all this grandeur and God-given talent being used to build up things of man and not things of God. Whereas we see when we go back to Zechariah today, God's heart desires for the people to be building themselves up under him and as his people, as he's having his work in them. So night and day contrast in approaches and results.
But they were specifically for rulers, correct?
No, not all of them. There were specific ones that were for rulers, but also there were some for their entourage and their minions. Yeah.
Okay, so you couldn't say there's 12 pyramids, so therefore there were 12 kings or 12
Right.
pharaohs. So you could correlate it like that.
Something funny, or just something that I find funny because I'm weird that way. Rather than counting by pyramids, one of the ways they actually count pharaohs is by bull burials. The Apis bull cow, you know, worship and all that stuff. Bull, B-U-L-L. Yeah, not bull. They're not the buried bull. Yeah,
I'm from the south.
yeah. Oil is not oil, it's oil.
I
But yes.
hope.
Bull, yeah. See, you rub it off on me, babe. No, but there's an Apis bull that is assigned basically with the pharaoh. And if the Apis bull doesn't die at the right time, then they take him to the Nile and drown him. But they don't let him drink from the Nile because he comes from the Nile and it's all water god, bull god. So that would be like cannibalism for the bull to drink from the Nile. So yeah, it's so much simpler with God. It really is.
Right.
It really, really is. Good morning.
not every pyramid is
Yeah.
a pharaoh.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm highlighting the pharaoh pyramids. There are lots of subservient pyramids for the subservient folk. And one of the things David Roll discovered with the errors in the Egypt timeline is the count of these bull burials with the pharaoh burials, and things are off. And so he saw, wait a minute, some of these lines of rulers or dynasties are overlapping. It's not all this dynasty after that dynasty after that dynasty. Some are ruling in rivalry to each other or just off from each other. Yeah, Brother
Did you
Kevin.
show a picture, it was last week or the Sunday before, that showed the main pyramid, and then there was like number of smaller
Yes.
pyramids that were there.
And we're going to see more of those today. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
More of what Ashley was asking is the way we were able to tell if it's a pharaoh or not is by what's buried with him
Right.
to take to the afterlife.
Yep.
So if you were a little, you were a nobody, you know,
You wouldn't have
you wouldn't have the
it.
gold and the,
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Right.
have all the things. But if you were a king or pharaoh, whatever you want to call him, he would have all the things. Even, didn't we see a ship?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, it was, you had to assemble it when you got
Yeah.
to the other world.
And Khufu's
Yeah,
ship is bigger than the Mayflower.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But we don't, but no one knows an exact count.
No, we are still discovering things. Yeah, Brother Clay. Thank you. 118 pyramids.
Wow.
Yeah,
And they're still finding.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because there could have been some that were destroyed or knocked down or whatever that are still the sites of it too.
The Shems haven't been discovered.
Right, yeah.
Yes, Shirley MacLaine's book was called Out on a Limb, and I couldn't agree more. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but
So,
yeah, please,
so-
by all means.
This is for everyone.
So what, and you'll just have to forgive me.
No
because
worries.
How my brain works. So the pharaohs, what were they from the different, okay, because we had Ham and brother, which line were the pharaohs?
Great question and refresher. So as we're talking about the Bible, and that's supposed to be what we're connecting all this to, how do the pharaohs fit in? The pharaohs are descendants of Ham's son Mizraim.
Yes, right.
They are followers of Horus. They have in their name title like Caesar Augustus or Kaiser Wilhelm or Tsar Nicholas in Russia. They have the title Horus X, Horus Scorpion, Horus this. Horus is for Noah. Their title refers back to Noah.
Their grandfathers.
Right.
How was it great?
Noah is given the title Horus, which means far distant, because remember, they all came from Mesopotamia. They all came from Noah's Ark, where they went down and rebuilt the cities that existed before the flood that they knew and were familiar with. And so at Nimrod, the city he rebuilt, Uruk there, that's the first city mentioned in the Bible. That's not the first city built. Eridu is Irad. But Uruk was built, Cain built it for Enoch. And so that's where we get the name Uruk. It's where we get the name Iraq. Iraq is named for this city, Uruk, which is named for Adam's grandson. Eridu was actually built before that. Enoch built that for his son, Irad. That's where they started building up the towers from there. Enoch built the first temple there, of course, false worship. And 17 temples later, with the flood in between there, Nimrod builds the Tower of Babel right on that very spot.
But pyramids are specifically burial.
Pyramids are specifically burial. They're taking that ziggurat Tower of Babel structure idea and now using it instead of a tower like a ladder, that stairway to heaven kind of thing, not Led Zeppelin reference. But as they are doing this, their idea is to transport the Pharaoh because the Pharaoh becomes God. This isn't the case of like Jacob's ladder where the angel's coming down and it's bringing us closer to God. It's them going to become God. That's where all that imagery from Journey's albums, is about that journey. And the Greek form, the river Styx, the band Styx, you pay the skeleton Charon to take you across the river Styx. So it's all that same thing. It's all this death worship where here we do the opposite. We celebrate life, not just the life to come, but this life. They look forward happily to the next life. Their life in this life wasn't death.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, that's what this is for. Absolutely. Right.
You don't get caught up in all of this ritualistic stuff.
Exactly.
That's why for us, we celebrate life. I mean, obviously we mourn and grieve as we should. A loss is a loss. When someone means something to us, they mean something to us. But as David said with his son, he's not going to come back to me, but I will go to him. So there's a hope and a joy in that that is completely missing from this. And so with Horus, it was Ham's son Mizraim, brother of Cush, who is very key in all of this. Yeah, Egypt, people in Egypt don't call themselves Egyptians. They don't call Egypt Egypt. Japan doesn't call itself Japan. It's Nippon. What we call the USSR didn't call itself the USSR. It was CCCP. Egypt, Egyptians call themselves Mazri. We are of Mizraim. Yeah, that guy from the Bible.
Sounds like misery.
Yeah. Have you been there? No. Kind of dry, as you can see. Didn't start that way after the flood, of course. But what happened was Mizraim took that name of Horus. Noah was called the far distant because it was believed he was given eternal life after the flood by the gods. He and his wife are placed back in not the Garden of Eden, but at the big land of Eden. And so Gilgamesh in the epic goes out to seek his great-great-great-grandpa, whatever, to learn secrets to immortality. He fails the test, ends up dying. And so it doesn't work out for him. But Noah's called the far distant, the Horus, so everyone's looking back to Noah. Yeah. No, that's what we're here for.
It just seems like, can you imagine, I mean, of course, it's presentism, but having that conversation with Noah, your granddad, saying, you know, I hear your story about this big flood, but I don't know if I'm buying it. So I'm going to go over here and worship all these false gods, or I'm going to make these graven images, or I'm going to worship the beetles, or whatever they're doing. I guess every generation looks at the previous generation like they're crazy.
Yeah, it happens.
But I just can't, well, yeah, my daughter, she thinks I'm absolutely insane. But I can't imagine having come through something so significant where God was present. He was
Exactly.
so present. And then to have your sons and your grandsons or your great-grandsons or however, to look at you and to say, no, we're gonna go, you know, carve an idol over here.
Mhm. Well, think about this. It's more than just disbelief. It is rebellion. Because think about this. The first generation born after the flood, we looked and we saw how Shem's son, ARPACHSHAD, is born exactly 1,000 years before Abraham. So when new life starts after the flood to the birth of Abraham is exactly a millennium, 1,000 years. The math just happens to work out that way. And so ARPACHSHAD's cousins in this new generation, he's a son of Shem, you know, going through the line of Christ that we're going to follow here. Ru is in that line. And so, but his cousins. So on Ham's side, we have Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Remember, when Noah gave his curse after his drunken embarrassment, he didn't curse Ham. God had blessed Ham. He cursed Canaan, who was alive at that time. The land that Canaan went to, God says, no, that's going to be my land. And the things you are doing there are contrary to me. And so you have disqualified yourself. You're getting kicked out, and Joshua is going to take my people in. And so that's the whole curse of Canaan. Ham was not cursed. Mizraim was not cursed. Put was not cursed. And so Ham's son, Ham was elevated as a sun god, Hamash. And so Cush, after the flood, was the first king of Uruk. Outside the Bible, he's known as Meschiad Kasher. His son, Nimrod, became the next king of Uruk. And from there, he built Eridu, the Tower of Babel. Babel's the name it got afterwards. Enmer, the hunter, in the outside the Bible, is Nimrod, the hunter. And so then his son, Ugobanda, then Dumuzi, who's in that whole cycle of, what's the word I'm looking for? Reincarnation and the Holy Family and worship, false worship and all that. And then we have Gilgamesh. So that's where all that comes from. But Mizraim, Ham's son Mizraim, took on the name Horus, followed that banner of Horus, Noah, the far distant, and went out along with Ham, along with Cush. Cush left and established Sudan and Ethiopia, the land of Cush. Mizraim went further, established Egypt. Put went on to Libya and up into Phoenicia. Canaan went to Canaan. And so that's how they all spread out. Another contradictory thought about Noah was that he died and was buried on Bahrain. So that's why all the pharaohs want to be on these boats, some assembly required, and how their spirits brought through the underworld back to where Noah is on Bahrain. We saw those burials there, those tomb burial mounds there. That's all trying to be where Noah's buried, the first Horus. And so they're all trying to go there and then get reincarnated, lifted up with the sun. You know, the beetle lifts them up with the sun disk and all that stuff, and lather, rinse, repeat, that kind of thing. So that's, and God is so much simpler. He really, really is, Sister Minnie. Sure. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a human thing to be drawn. I mean, we'll see when we get to Japan and China stuff, you know, the ancestor worship that happens with some of that. So absolutely, it's a human nature thing to be drawn, to have a connection. I mean, we go on ancestry.com and we want to have these connections to a history and a past. So it's very natural, because why? We are made that way. And the beautiful thing is we do have a history. We do have a past. It's called the Bible. And that's what we're seeing play out here. Now, after the Tower of Babel, those who were dispersed from the Tower of Babel and banished, etc., those who came over to Egypt, while those in Egypt under Mizraim took the banner of Horus, the sky god, falcon, hawk, and all that stuff, they took on the banner of Seth, who was Cush. And so Seth was Lord Chaos. In the Greek, that's where we get our word for chaos. It's from Cush. And so there's an epic battle between the followers of Horus and the followers of Seth after the Tower of Babel. The natives, now natives, locals, the followers of Horus under Mizraim, they won. But it was after that battle, you know, Scorpion King and all that, they said, okay, we need to strengthen and establish things. That's when they unified all of Egypt under his son, Menes. And so we got the first dynasty of a united Egypt. And so, and everything follows out there. Now we're winding down the fourth dynasty. Dynasty is just a line of rulers. They didn't know these dynasties back then. It was something that was made late, just like chapters and verses in the Bible. These dynasties were assigned later. So yeah, so that's where all that stuff comes from. So this guy, Jeffrey, Jeffrey, or however his name is pronounced. Here is his less than impressive pyramid. What's left of it? Yeah. So let's take a look here and see what's going on. Yeah. Not quite looking like the others.
Was it destroyed or was it just not built well?
The original thought, great question. So what happened? The original thought was that for some reason or another, they never got the opportunity. That's obviously not it. You gotta watch the pictures get thrown in. It was originally thought that they just didn't get around to finishing it for whatever reason. He died too soon, they ran out of money, whatever the case may be. Building materials, yeah, exactly. So trade embargo, or there was a pandemic outbreak and all the ships are sitting on the port outside, they can't bring them in. Who knows? But turns out that was not the case after all, because from 1995 to 2005, they did a new study and survey, and turns out this thing was finished. It just got plundered and basically demolished. So not much left of the pyramid of poor Pharaoh Jeffrey. Yeah, there we go.
Those big old stones all the way, you know, they're so tall and everything.
You know what's easier than building? Destroying.
Refresh that thing again.
Please.
Yep.
Yeah, searching for treasure.
And so not too impressive remains here. But then we go to the next pharaoh, Khafre.
Now, I know in the famous pictures of the Giza pyramids, there are 3 big ones. Well, here is number 2. This guy, this pharaoh, Khafre. So first was Khufu, now Khafre. They like the letter K. And so this guy is now pharaoh, 3rd king of the 4th dynasty. And so let's check out his pyramid.
Why do all the pharaohs look the same?
It's an art aesthetic. And why do all the models look the same on magazines? They don't really look that way. They're airbrushed and photoshopped. And, yeah. So same thing, just like we know in Renaissance times, they like things a little on the larger side and more rounded in their imageries. So fashion comes and goes. And we'll see a fascinating thing when we get to Joseph, how his pharaohs and their pyramids aren't idealized. They're actually shown with the wear and tear of the famine and everything expressed in their statues.
So it's artist rendition.
Yeah, artist rendition. There is some of that. But we'll also see there, as we continue to go along, we'll see a bit more detail happen. So here is that second pyramid in Giza, the pyramid of Khafre. Big way to identify this one is it still has part of the cap on the top there. So when you see that line, that means, okay, that's Khafre's pyramid. That's not any of the other 2.
He ruled after Jeffrey,
Yeah, he is the next pharaoh after Jeffrey.
but we're still in the same dynasty.
Same dynasty, the
Same
4th dynasty.
just different rulers.
Yep,
Well,
his name is actually Jedafre.
Take it free.
Yeah, I call him Jeffrey.
Take it.
Yeah. Well, if you remember too, when we were doing all the dispersions from the Tower of Babel in all the Old English and the Danish and all those things, all those different lines, Theodore and Baldric and all that stuff, there was a Bubba. Yeah, I remember there was a Bubba. So every family's got one. Yes, that was, yeah, that was South Denmark. Yeah. Yes. So that's obviously first picture there is not this pyramid because it doesn't have that cap on it. So sometimes people just throw things on there. Yeah. Yeah, they do light shows. Yeah.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. You are here. Aiming towards there. That's not Khafre's pyramid, doesn't have the cap on it. Yep. Yeah. Tourism is alive and well. We talked about that last week, Assassin's Creed Origin, where the player has to go to the tomb of Khufu. Yes, and DuckTales too, where Uncle Scrooge has to go through the traps. That's on the Game Boy. See the little people here?
The little people.
Yes. Little person there. And there's the top of the pyramid up there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure enough. There's a sports field in the, yeah. Yeah. Kind of a football team, right?
But look at the juxtaposition of.
Yeah. Absolutely. You see a lot of that. I saw a lot of that in Greece. You see a lot of that here in Egypt. And the people and the stones. Yeah. So that's that. But also there's this funerary temple right in front. Yeah, related to the funeral stuff. So some interesting pictures here too. And again, keep in mind, this is during Bible times. This is during the end of the 2400s. This is when Ru is growing up, Abraham's great-grandpa. Egypt is this world power at this time. And an important thing to keep in mind, the Egypt of Abraham is completely different from the Egypt of Joseph, which is different from the Egypt of Moses, which is way different from the Egypt of Josiah. And so these were real places and real people that they all dealt with and had their impact on the people of the Bible, and the people of the Bible had their impact on them.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Wasn't even a US.
Yeah, we weren't.
Yeah, the land was here the whole time. Yeah. And so the earth is the same. And yeah, so there's the cap right there on Cheops in the middle. See, and there's where we mentioned the little ones in front. We're talking about that. Yeah. And some of the downtown. My favorite part of this picture, sneakers. I don't associate sneakers and camels, but you know, that's just me. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think any of those cities or towns are built on top of any of those pyramids that they never found?
Oh, quite possible. In fact, the ruins of the cities of the Israelites, while they were in Egypt, they farm on top of it. They have to, when they excavate it every year, the guy's been there for decades, Manfred Tech. He excavates, time comes, they have to close it back up and allow the farmers to plant on top of it again. Then they come back next season, dig it all up, and the cycle repeats. Yeah, so life is going on top of life. Remember, Nimrod's Tower of Babel was the 17th tower over that same spot. Everything's just building on top of each other. That's why when you dig down, the deeper you go, the older you get. In the city of Leonard Woolley discovered as he was going down, we talked about this at the time, okay, here's people, here's people, here's people, okay, no people, no people, no people. His crew boss said, okay, we're done, no more people. He said, no, keep going, keep going. So he said, fine, whatever. So they go through like 11 feet of the silt, all of a sudden they find people again. Well, what's with this layer of no people? So he's asking people, they're trying to figure out, they can't figure it out. His wife comes by, she said, what y'all talking about? They can't figure out what this layer is. She says, well, duh, it's the flood. Yeah.
You know, it's like when I go to with the UDC and we go and we clean the headstones. We were just there back in March or May, and some of the headstones there that we were cleaning, they're sinking. They're sinking into the ground. And so one of the things that we do is we go and we brush them out and redefine them. But we've even found some that we're going to have to replace because they get to a point to where I don't know if it's just the settling of the earth or, but if you think about it, if we see it today, just at our cemeteries, imagine how it was when they were building on top of them, you know, you all
Yeah.
but yeah, it was in flood. Yeah, and then the flood.
Yeah, then the flood came.
I guess it's just how things naturally settle, you know, because we have a couple of headstones of the soldiers that we maintain, and one of them is like, you know, it's like this now, and but at the same time, the earth had built up. It was sinking, but then the earth had built up, so you couldn't see the fellow's death dates. So we had to dig it out, even though it was sinking. We had to dig it out. It was literally like it was being covered. It was, yeah, literally like it was being covered.
Well, now keep this in mind. Those graves you're talking about, 150 years old. Here we're talking 4,000 years. Both. Nature. The transition from the flood. Yeah. Exactly, the displacement. Yeah, as this sinks, it pushes the sand that was there, it replaces the sand that was there, and that sand gets pushed up.
Desert, so as the
Yeah.
wind comes and blows
Yeah.
the sand, which it does
Right.
every night, I believe, throughout the day. And it continues, yeah, to build up.
Keep in mind too, that, what was I gonna say? That the Sphinx, for example, was completely buried under sand. That was dug out.
Well, and I remember, Eric, from your other class, when you talked about the flood, how it wasn't just water, there was volcanic activity, there was
Watch out.
all this upheaval. It was chaos.
Yeah.
We're still recovering from that. The earth is still.
Oh, yeah,
Because all this, climate change stuff is.
That is the only true climate
that is
change,
the only
is the
climate
earth
change.
resettling after Noah's flood of 2952 BC.
Yeah, the earth is still.
53.
sad from all of this. It's not.
yeah.
The Bible says that what the earth is grown, it groans.
Romans 8.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And then that settled after the flood. And that was the whole Pangea with the continents breaking up and moving around. And we see, and I've got a picture from when we were at the Chaffee Zoo in Fresno, where they showed the Pangea, but where the Garden of Eden was never moved. Everything broke away from it, but that stayed in place. So what Moses describes in Genesis, he describes in the present tense as he's writing. They still existed then. They still exist now as it's described there. So that didn't get moved around with all that shifting. Everything else did. So that's why when we see what Moses described, we're able to look and see, oh, there it is. It all fits. So with that, let's see. That's actually a good stopping point, looking at the time. So just a little quick, let me actually do this. Go to this slide here. We got bumped out of it, but we'll scroll on down. I want that one right there. Okay. So let's go to Zechariah. Closing the book of Zechariah. Let's go to chapter 9. So it's got a mind of its own. I want 391.
Would this map be in our Bible?
Some Bibles might have it, but they'll have some differences. For example, this is the Exodus route. There's Mount Sinai over here. It's not in the Sinai Peninsula. So there'll be some differences, but some of your Bibles will have this. This is all on Google Earth that I've got this all done up on. So there's Khafre's pyramid with that cap on it that we're talking about here. So this pyramid, 706 feet length, goes up to 448 feet, 53-degree angle. It looks taller than Khufu's, but it's not, because it's on a foundation bedrock that's 33 feet higher. So that's why the top is taller, but it's got an elevated base. And so this guy Khufu, he had 12 sons, 3 or 4 daughters, and so more on him later. But here in Zechariah, let's close out here. So again, we see the seekings and the strivings of man, but we always bring it back to the unchanging goodness of our God. And so with this in Zechariah 9, as the people in this time of restoration are called not to be discouraged and distracted, but to focus on building up the Lord's house and their own lives under God. Look what's said in Zechariah 9, verse 9. See if any of this sounds familiar. Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Jesus fulfilled this at the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday. So rejoice, your king is coming to you. He's coming to you humbly, but he's your king, and he's coming to be with you. Verse 11. Because we think of, now when we go to verse 11, remember New Testament times, New Covenant, Jesus, Lord's Supper, the blood of the covenant, all that stuff. So that's all New Testament stuff, right? Zechariah 9:11. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I have set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. So blood of the covenant meant something to God even back then, looking forward to its fulfillment in Christ. So there will not be a bottomless, endless pit. A lot of this worship from Mesopotamia was worship of the underworld, worship of the abyss underneath. And so a lot of their gods came from that. Here God's saying, no, there is no waterless pit that you're going to be
worried about or trapped in or stuck in. No, I'm the one who frees you from everything because of the blood that was spilled for this covenant, for my promise to you, my contract with you. Verse 16. And the Lord their God will save them in that day as the flock of his people. Well, I thought sheep was a whole New Testament thing. No. The Lord their God will save them, Zechariah 9:16, as the flock of his people. For they are as the stones of a crown, sparkling in his land. That's what you are to him. When I pastored the Arlington church, we hosted the state association. It was the 75th association, the diamond anniversary. I preached the annual message, that verse, thinking of the jewelry, the diamond, about how we, if we can wrap ourselves around it, in the eyes of the Lord, we are the jewels in his crown. That's how precious we are to him. I know we mostly feel like diamonds in the rough, and yeah, there's truth to that, but he's the one who polishes us off and strengthens us and lifts us up. So let's see here. Chapter 10, verse 2. For the teraphim speak iniquity, the diviners see lying visions and tell false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted because there is no shepherd. Talking about a time when the Lord's people aren't being guided and aren't being led. And the Lord's not okay with that. He talks about his anger being against those shepherds who do that stuff in the following verses. Let's skip down to verse 6. What the Lord says he's going to do. Zechariah 10:6. I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph. And I will bring them back, because I have had compassion on them. And they will be as though I had not rejected them. For I am their God, the Lord their God, and I will answer them. You ever have a falling out with someone and then you patch things up and it's like, it's okay, but it's not the same as it was? Yeah, we've all been there. Here the Lord is saying, they will be as though I had not rejected them, as if it never happened. When Christ forgives us, it's as if our sin never happened. Yeah. When he cleans us, we are washed whiter than snow. Their sins be as scarlet, they will be white as snow. Come, let us reason together is how that begins from Isaiah chapter 1. That's the love of God for us. These are things he is calling us into. While the sons of Ham and Mizraim, and they're all doing all this stuff out of rebellion because they're upset with the curse that was placed on Canaan, and they're upset and they're rejecting the God of their fathers. Their parents, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, who survived the flood. They're saying, no, we're going to reject that. We're rejecting what you're giving us. We're going to go do our thing. Here God is saying, just come to me. Come, let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, they will be as white as snow. When he forgives completely. He says, they will be as though I had not rejected them. I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. Now keep in mind, the book of Zechariah is not part of the law of Moses. It is not completed, closed out, and set aside. This is alive and well and applies to us today. So we can take hold of these promises and bring them to God, bring his word to him and say, hey, God, we want this. Lord, you promised this. This is still living and active. And so this is what we desire. Bring us into this. Have your will, your work in our lives, as this is what we are seeking under you. This is what he has provided. So with that, we'll close up for today. Any other thoughts, questions, observations on anything from this morning's Sunday school class? If not, I really appreciate the thoughts and questions and discussions, because I don't want to just hear myself. I can do this as a hobby in my own time. This is for everyone. So I'm really blessed that everyone's taking hold of this and jumping in and having these interactions and discussions, which means the world to me. And so I pray this benefits and most importantly, draws us closer to the Bible and the Lord's truth and the life he has for us. So with that, turn the services back over, close out here. So stop the screen share, stop.